Good morning, y'all. This is Bud Elliott of the Nolecast, and just a kind of a quickie this morning. I wanted to react to a few recent happenings in the FSU football world, and let's get right into it. Of course, I want to start off the top, thanking our friend Chad. Awesome job, legendary team. 844 FSU loan, 844 FSU loan. If you need a home loan, that's the guy to call. 844 FSU loan is the number. You can also hit them up. Obviously, have the link right there in the show notes. 600 Nolecast listeners have decided to use the legendary team for their home loan. I've done it twice. I think they really crush. So hit up Chad. All right, let's get into this. Off the top, we have some relatively good news. AZ Thomas and Josh Farmer both measured in really well at the Senior Bowl. So, that's pretty incredible. Farmer was 6'3"-ish, slightly under, and 314 long arms. AZ Thomas was 85th percentile or better in basically every single category. I did see a couple mock drafts actually that had Thomas going in the first round. So that's a guy who definitely had a lot of options before last season, decided to stay with FSU and really was, a guy who, I think everybody on the staff just loved him. So, Farmer also has a real chance to improve his draft stock, I think, at the Senior Bowl. The length on him is good, as I mentioned. So, we'll be watching for that. But, man, AZ Thomas first round would be another feather in the cap for this Knowles program. Some negative stuff I want to hit real fast here. So, Brady Smigel decommitting is, I would say it's kind of a blow, but at the same time, when you hire Gus Malzahn to be your OC, you have to get somebody who fits. And we discussed this in the last podcast when Graham was on, but there's no way in hell if you're a pocket passer, you're going to play for Gus Malzahn. That's career suicide. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for him to decommit and go find an offense that's going to pass the ball more and more effectively than FSU is going to do, with the Malzahn hire. And I don't hate the Malzahn hire, right? If I'm Mike Norvell, my goal isn't building long term. Well, that can't be my primary goal. My primary goal is winning enough ball games this year so I don't get fired. And obviously, with what the market was going to bear, from a transfer portal standpoint, coming off of a 2-10 season, I think the Malzahn hire is probably a smart hire based on what you could likely accumulate in the portal. But obviously, you're not going to take a pocket passing quarterback for Gus Malzahn's offense. I think we look at the stat, right? The last time that Malzahn's off, the last 8 or 9 times that Malzahn's offense has passed 25 or more times in a game against an FBS or Power 5 team, I think it was, they're 0-8. So, yeah, I just don't think this is a surprise or anything to get all up in arms about once you accept that this is the decision you made for offensive coordinator. It's not going to be an offense that's going to attract an elite level passing quarterback at this point. You can go back to the Cam Newton Auburn days, sure, but Cam had some issues, right? He got kicked out of Florida for the stolen laptop thing and was coming out of junior college. But since then, it's you want a runner in this offense, and Brady is not a runner. I'm not saying he's the least athletic quarterback I've ever seen, but he is not athletic on a college scale. I know he ran some in high school. Cool, I get that, but seeing him move around, he's also overage, for his group, so he's not somebody who's likely to unlock a lot more athleticism. FSU, I'm sure, will go after somebody who is a lot more athletic and probably not as good of a passer. And that's not a knock. That's just what you're running right now in Tallahassee. They've offered a couple kids. Honestly, the one that I would actually get excited about if they could land is Keyshawn Henderson. He's a kid who's currently committed to Houston. I've seen him a whole lot on the 7-on-7 circuit. A lot of people think that he should play receiver. I think for NFL aspects, I'm kind of one of them, but he did get a lot better as a passer. He does have a huge arm, and I think he would totally kill it in Gus Malzahn's offense. So if you manage to have a really, really good season, a better season than I think you're going to have, maybe a guy like that is in play. But again, I'm not really sure that he is going to be in play. Are you really going to be in a position to be pulling a big-time player out of state with how the offense is probably going to look, which doesn't mean it's going to suck, but like I just don't think it's going to be amazing or anything. It's like gets a player who's a big time guy with big time options to be like, yeah, I want to go play in that. So it's hard to get real excited about high school recruiting, right now when everything you did in the portal is like save this season mode, which again, we talked about this kind of principal agent. The best interest of the program may not align with the best interest of the head coach. The head coach has to save his job, and the staff around him has to save their jobs, right now. So they're doing everything for right now. But right now can help the future, obviously. They're pretty correlated. So Henderson's a guy. If they did get him, I think you get pretty excited. Everybody else kind of like, whatever. Like not terrible, but just not somebody at this point I'm getting really excited about pending some senior year stuff. Let me tell you about Congruity. Matt Lewis absolutely crushes it for us. Congruity, I think 10 plus businesses who are Nolecast listeners have decided to go with Matt Congruity. Hit him up. His new email actually is matt@congruityhr.com, matt@congruityhr.com. Whether you need payroll solutions, HR solutions, any kind of business optimization, logistics, you're getting into a little healthcare, that's big. I know we had a big-time listener of ours decided to go with them. So let me know how your experience has been. I think Matt's absolutely crushed it. He does awesome stuff for us as well. So with that, let's talk a little bit about this FSU football schedule, which got released on Monday night on the ACC Network, 9 to 11 p.m. That was whatever. I mean, kind of a curious thing. But I'll just read it down real fast, and then we'll kind of discuss some finer points and get you out of here on a Tuesday morning. So Bama opens the season Saturday, August 30th in Tallahassee. The stadium hopefully will be ready by then. Then you get East Texas A&M. I watch a lot of football, guys, and I don't actually ever recall seeing East Texas A&M on a schedule. So that's probably a good game to take your kids to if you manage to get like an evening kick. If not, good Lord. Kent State then comes to town. Kent State is, by almost any measure, the worst team in D1. So you should get a win there. Then you are on short rest to Virginia on Friday night. I'll come back to that in a second. October 4th, Miami comes to town, so you actually get the extra day of rest there playing on the Friday. And then you are hosting Pitt on October 11th. Then you go to Stanford October 18th. Then you get a bye week before hosting Wake Forest. Then you go to Clemson. You come home and you host the Hokies, Virginia Tech. Then you are short rest to NC State on a Friday night. And then you are at Florida to end the season. So a quick eyeball here. I think you are probably favored in 7 games and obvious underdogs in 3 or 4 and potentially a dog in 1 more, depending on how NC State looks. And you might say, like, Bud, that's crazy. This team just went 2-10, and they did, and they completely sucked. But I am banking on quite a bit of positive regression for this team. I think it's just largely common sense, unless you think it's just going to be a disaster again, which I don't. I don't think they're going to crush. I don't think they're going to be anything real special. I mean, it could certainly go sideways. But I also know like what they did in the portal. And although we talked about it, I don't think there's a lot of true difference makers in this year's portal. If you were willing to spend, and they certainly spent, I think you get some guys who are like solid football players who have had good reps before. Like go watch Gunnar Hansen play against the Hokies. Okay. Is he special? No. Is he going to go pro? I don't know. Could he play against those guys? Yeah, he could. And you paid up for that. And you got a guy who has some reasonable certainty as to the floor of his ability. So I think that's pretty key here. Who do you miss on this schedule? You missed Georgia Tech, you missed Louisville, and you missed SMU. Now, SMU lost, I think, every single player who got all conference mention. So that's a lot to lose. And we'll see how well they keep it together. But with the money they spend, I would be quite surprised if SMU is in the bottom half of the league. Louisville is a team that, my friend Bill Connolly actually picked them to win the league next year, just trying to keep it interesting over Clemson. But ultimately, that's a team that will be important to miss most likely next year. And Georgia Tech, I think, will have a step back. That they couldn't pay up to keep Singleton, the receiver, away from Auburn. They have several fringe guys who are likely to go like 6th, 7th round who were out of eligibility. And I think that team had some real just kind of special chemistry if you watch them this year, like how hard they played for one another. They really cared. And not every team has that every year, certainly. So while I think Tech is worse next year, I think Louisville is potentially better, and SMU is probably a little bit worse. Those are still likely to be 3 upper half teams in the league that you miss. So from a league schedule standpoint, because you play Miami and because you play Clemson, that's obviously going to be one of the more difficult schedules in the conference. But this is not an Irish year. You do play Bama to open the year, and Bama was a very weird team last year. They were bad enough to get smoked by Oklahoma and also somehow good enough to beat Georgia. That was when Georgia had Carson back healthy. So that's a difficult opener. Let's talk about some of the intricacies of this schedule. I am a little bit worried, obviously, but you want to play the games regardless because you want good opponents to come into Doak Campbell. Bama to open when you're coming off 2-10 sounds a lot worse than Bama to open when you're coming off like 9-3 or 10-2, right? Bama's going to have better players than you. They'll be bigger, faster, stronger than you are because they recruit high school real well and you don't. So it's sort of just like a height, weight, speed type thing, but they will have a new quarterback to break in, and we will see how that works. I think there is some real uncertainty there. At times this year, they were clearly frustrated with Jalen Milroe, and yet they stuck with him. Now, I think it made sense to stick with him because he was the best option to help you win ball games because his athleticism is just off the charts. And like the guy is not always, but almost always the best athlete on the field when he has the ball in his hands. But they were frustrated with him, and I don't know what they will do at quarterback. Maybe you get somebody who executes the offense a little bit better, but we've seen that before. It's like, okay, cool. He executes what you call better. How does it work when the stuff you call breaks down? Oh, not as well because he's not a total freak. So I don't know who the new quarterback's going to be for Bama. It's going to be Austin Mack. Is it going to be Simpson? Possibly. I guess we'll see who wins that job. But I do think it says something that they didn't go to the backup this year, even to spell Milroe at all when he was having some of these meltdown games. So how much confidence do they really have in a Jalen Milroe? Regardless, I think you got to make sure this game, if you do lose it, doesn't break you. And I think this is where having 2 real easy opponents, I mean, you're going to win one by, I'd be shocked if you don't win by 4 touchdowns over Kent State. And East Texas A&M, I'm going to have to do some more research on them because I've never actually heard of them at all. But that's probably insane. Hopefully FSU got a real good discount to bring East Texas. I gotta look this up on there. East Texas A&M. Are they any good? Let's check it out. All right. They were 7th place in the Southland Conference. Okay. Their schedule for 2024. Let's check it out. All right. So a horrendous San Diego State team. I actually know some guys who coach over there. Beat them 45-14 to open the year. They lost to UC Davis by 2 scores. They lost to Grambling. Okay, Sacramento State, it's a pretty good FCS team, shut them out 34-0. They lost Southeast Louisiana 21-9. They beat Northwestern State 42-21. So that's a little embarrassing for Northwestern State there. Lamar game was kind of close. Prairie View A&M was kind of close. They lost to McNeese 31-3. They beat Stephen F. Austin, which is a little surprising, but I think Austin lost most of their defense to La Tech in a weird, like, little transfer following a coach situation. They beat Houston Christian by 1, and they lost to Incarnate Word 38-24 to finish 3-9 and 2-4 in the Southland Conference. Was that an outlier year? It was not. They actually only won 1 game the prior year against McNeese. They went 1-9, and then they won a game by forfeit over Northwestern State. I don't really remember. Was that COVID or something, or just out of players potentially? All right. Then the prior year they went 5-6, and in 21. Wow, they were pretty good in 21. They went 7. Well, all things speaking, but they went 7-4, and these are all weird teams. So I wonder if they switched divisions, because in 2021 they played Colorado State Pueblo, Midwestern State, West Florida, Texas A&M Kingsville, UFTL, which I do not know what that is. UFTL. Jeez, this is got some rabbit hole Nolecast, guys. UFTL is the University of Fort Lauderdale? Yeah. Okay, they played the University of Fort Lauderdale in 2021. That is surprising. Had you guys heard of that before? I had not. Saginaw Valley, which I'm guessing is in Michigan. Western New Mexico. Then they also played Eastern New Mexico. They won both. So they're kind of like the champions of the directional New Mexicos. West Texas A&M, the University of Texas of the Permian Basin, and then Angelo State. I wonder where Angelo State is. Is it in? Oh, it's in Texas. Okay. It's in San Angelo, Texas. And they got whipped by Angelo State. So, yeah, I'm spending way too much time on East Texas A&M University, but that was just a fun little rabbit hole. Anyway, UVA has a new quarterback this year. They did get a little bit better last year. That's a game that, if this is going right, FSU, based on how much money it spends and the resources it has and the tradition it has, it should win that ball game on a Friday night in Charlottesville. If it doesn't, then I think you got real problems. Because if it doesn't win that, you're probably 2-2, and that's not great. Unless Virginia is way, way better than I think they are, and it's certainly possible that they could be. But I kind of doubt it. If they're beating you, especially if they beat you like convincingly, that ain't great. Miami comes to town. Miami will be favored in Doak at this point, best I can tell. I do like that you get an extra day of rest there before the Hurricanes come to town. That's kind of the benefit of playing on the Friday here, as we will discuss in a minute. Miami has a new quarterback in Carson Beck. We have no idea if he's going to be healthy or not. If he is, then, I mean, obviously, I think at this point, objectively, you're going to pick Miami for that game, because I think Miami is way more physical and tough than you are along the lines of scrimmage, especially. So they'll have a quarterback advantage and obviously like a physicality line of scrimmage and just overall athlete advantage on you. But being in Tallahassee, like, that's never an easy game for them to go win unless you've just totally rolled over, which I doubt. Pitt then comes to town. Pitt this year kind of like ran real lucky early and then ran kind of unlucky late. I think Pitt will still be a solid football team, probably not quite as good as they looked at times this year, but maybe not quite as bad as they looked at other times. So I'm projecting kind of a neutral position on Pitt relative to where they were last year. Then you go to Stanford. This is kind of tough, actually. Stanford out there has played some people pretty tough, surprisingly. They almost beat TCU to open the year. This is the third year under Troy Taylor. Troy Taylor was a really good coach at the FCS level and should have them fairly feisty, but still, again, it's not a game you should be losing. Then you finally get to the bye week. Wake Forest comes to town. Wake Forest obviously lost a ton. They also have a very late season coaching staff turnover. Dave Clawson finally was like, all right, about all I can do here, just with the current state of NIL. FSU took their center, who I know FSU is really, really happy to have. And that's not a game you should be losing at home to Wake Forest at all. At Clemson, I mean, that's probably the game on the schedule. You'll be the biggest underdog. I mean, that's probably what, if Clemson hits and they actually play to kind of their potential, and FSU also plays to its potential, I still think Clemson in Death Valley is 10 points or more on a point spread basis. Then the Hokies come to town. This one I actually feel relatively good about because, man, they got picked over in the transfer portal in a major way. And I was a little surprised that it was that bad, but it was, man. Like, they lost their good corner. They lost their really good offensive tackle. Just didn't seem like they had the money to compete with those SEC schools. That's a little surprising. And I think kind of a canary in a coal mine for the ACC, that like some of these SEC schools that did not have good years are just picking you apart transfer portal wise, when you're supposed to be like team 3, team 4, team 5, team 6, somewhere in that range in the ACC, and you're just not competitive in the transfer portal in terms of the bidding for some of these players. But Frank Beamer had some magic, and that is hard to recapture. Then you're on the road at NC State. NC State actually loses a pretty good bit. Last year felt like it was kind of an all-in year for them, and it just did not work out. Obviously, Grayson McCall, quarterback, just never got it back together fully, from what he had when he was at Coastal Carolina. They do have a promising young quarterback in CJ Bailey, but they lose some important playmakers. They lose some really good guys on defense. It's hard for me to say that FSU will be favored on short rest in that game in Raleigh. That place will be rocking. Friday night's a very tough place for them to play. That's a well-coached football team. They seem to understand kind of who they are. But, I think if you're an FSU fan, that's a game that you go in expecting to win, although I'm not entirely convinced that you'll be favored in that game. Now, if you do win it, it's great because A, you get a win on national TV, and B, you get the game in Gainesville with an extra day of rest. And I got to see who Florida has on the schedule here. Their schedule is, check it out, men's football schedule. Oh, there's no women's football. So they play Tennessee the week before, and that's in Gainesville. And then before that, they play at Oxford, at Kentucky, and then they play Georgia, a neutral before that. So that is 5 straight games for UF. Obviously, Ole Miss should be good again. Tennessee should be good again. Georgia will be good again. Kentucky probably sucks again. I mean, there is a chance, and we heard this narrative this year, and it didn't turn out to be fully true. There's a chance Florida's pretty banged up by that point in the season. That is a bit of a gauntlet to finish with. And, I mean, Florida should be pretty damn good this year because Lagway is just, I can count the number of quarterbacks I would take over Lagway on one hand, and I could lose a finger and still probably do it. So, I mean, he's pretty special. Just the throws he makes, the pressure he escapes is really nice. But getting the extra day of rest there for this Noles team really does help. And so I think that's kind of the upside there of playing some of these Friday night games. The downside, however, is what we saw this year, which is you play a lot of these, I call them island games, okay? Like games that are out on an island unto themselves. You played the one, obviously, against Boston College this year. That sucked. You lose on national TV. It's the only game anybody's watching. Everybody's talking about it on social media. Your buddies are watching it. They're not watching other games. They're not turning it off. So they're texting you, talking shit to you, all that stuff. You lose the game at Georgia Tech, which was a standalone game there on Labor Day. You just have so many standalone games here that you have the opportunity to really kind of piss down your leg on national television. And that's embarrassing. And I can't write that possibility off after seeing what this team was last year. Now, most likely they won't do that entirely because I do think that the floor of the players they brought in, for the most part, is pretty decent, especially on the O-line. I don't think these guys are special. I don't think many of these guys are going to play professional football, but I think most of them can play at an ACC level. So from that standpoint, that's good. But, man, there is some real opportunity here in the schedule to, if you don't have your stuff together, you're going to get embarrassed early and often, which, to me, is an important discussion to have. Like after watching this schedule, what record does Mike Norvell need to keep his job? What record does Mike Alford need Mike Norvell to have to keep his job? Okay. Because obviously, they haven't done anything with basketball. Football has to be the cash cow here, and you got to fill Doak. And people are not going to pay premium ticket prices if you look like crap. I think you probably got to go 7-5. Now, you might say, Bud, that's way too low. This is FSU, blah, blah, blah. You fired Bobby Bowden for going, 6-6. And that's true. They did. But they were also worried about losing a coach who they thought was really good. And I don't think the estimation of Jimbo Fisher at that time was incorrect. I think he did a great job in Tallahassee, at least, until stuff got really sideways. But so 7-5 to me would be basically you lose Bama, you beat East Texas A&M, you beat Kent State, you beat UVA, so you're 3-1. You lose to Miami, 3-2. You beat Pitt, you're 4-2. You beat Stanford, you're 5-2. You beat Wake, you're 6-2. Okay. You lose to Clemson, so you're 6-3. You beat Tech, so you're 7-3. You lose at NC State, so you're 7-4, and you lose at Florida, so you're 7-5. That's probably the most likely path that I see in this schedule right now. Now you might say like that's an insane record to accept because how many bowl teams are you actually beating there? 2, and I don't disagree, honestly. I think you go 7-5, you're probably safe. What does it do to recruiting, or is it just kind of running out the clock? Possibly, but that's kind of my take on it right now. But roughly kind of what I see. Now they could. I'm not going to be right on that. They're going to win games that I projected them to lose, and they will almost certainly lose games that I projected them to win. It's just if you think you can nail somebody's schedule, unless it's like I don't know, like super vintage, Bama back in the day or something like that. Even then, they would still lose ball games. Like Saban only had one undefeated season. If you can nail the schedule, go right ahead. That's just me eyeballing it, kind of running some projections real quick. I think though, like that you're projecting a 2-10 team to go 7-5. It does that does show that there's some real improvement here. And this is not the easiest schedule in the world. The key is going to be how good is Stanford? I mean, first of all, the main key is you. Like, how good are you? But then it becomes how good is Stanford? Like, how big of a jump do they make? So you got to go play that road game out there. And then how good are the Hokies and how good are the Wolfpack? Because if those teams slip a lot, that's probably how you get to like 8-4, 9-3. If those teams are feisty and are pretty are hard outs, then that's how you end up going 5-7 and getting fired. A lot of uncertainty as the QB position with some of these teams. Obviously, we don't know if Drones is going to take a step for the Hokies. We don't know how Beck's going to look for Miami, although I think we can kind of guess he's going to be okay. But it's a guess, right? Brock Purdy came back off Tommy John on a faster timeline than Beck is projected to come back on. But that's still like sample set of 1. There's not a whole lot of quarterbacks who have TJ. And then, obviously, we don't know how the Bama quarterback is going to look. One thing we do know is that Charlie Park Rooftop Restaurant is awesome. CharlieParkRooftop.com. Graduations, any kind of celebrations, you want to get a nice lunch or dinner up there, go hit it. Little cocktail. Weather is getting real nice. It's cold for a little bit of cold, but now we are looking good. Obviously, make sure we hit up Madso and Township. Matt Thompson does an awesome job with the For the Table group there, and hopefully this team is decent this year. So people flock back to Tallahassee and fill those restaurants because, there's a lot of local businesses who don't have the swings as far as the service they provide. Like, you're not going 13-0 in terms of service one year and then 2-10 the next. Every time you go in, at least every time I've ever gone in, I get a great experience. So highest endorsement. They've been with us for a long time. I think you kind of know what you're going to get. We should do these more often, just little short ones, maybe a couple times a week and just kind of shoot the breeze on some of this stuff. But I thought this was solid. I am looking forward to watching the Senior Bowl. I really want to see what AZ is going to run at the Combine if he runs, and I want to see how Farmer looks at the Senior Bowl. We will kind of get more of the recruiting swing of things. It's weird because we don't get a lot of people asking us recruiting stuff right now, and I think that kind of speaks to the people being like, does it matter? It does still matter, okay? It can't just be lame duck season for the next 2 years. It has to matter. But I understand your viewpoint that it's kind of like, okay, the kids you're getting right now after going 2-10 are really like kids who you even care about or are going to want on the team, long term. But to that, I would answer like, what about Chroma? That kid's like legitimately good. A couple of these kids are worth a shot, certainly, like the upside. And if they don't work out, transfer out. So I think it's still really important to follow it. But I get your viewpoint on that. So maybe we'll change up how we do some of the recruiting stuff. Camp season is about to be in full swing. I'll be down there in Miami, Orlando. I think I'm going to Atlanta and maybe Dallas because obviously FSU has a pretty strong Dallas connection. They seem to recruit that area pretty heavily. So we'll be checking all of those out and comments, questions, make sure you leave those 5-star reviews on Apple and like and subscribe to the channel. I will see you all next time. I think Graham is joining us as well for the next time. See you guys.